what if humanity's biggest blind spot isn't, out there somewhere in space or under a microscope, but actually right here, inside us, in how we understand ourselves, the universe?
That's a powerful question to start with.
Yeah, and today we're diving deep into some ancient wisdom that really tackles these questions head on. The Bhagavad Gita. Think of this as like your express route to some pretty profound insights.
We'll be drawing from a few key sources. Dr. Ramanand Prasad's Bhagavad Gita, which includes the English text and commentary from the International Gita Society, also Bhagavad Gita as it is, and importantly, commentaries from the great sage Shankara and others.
Right. And Prasad's work is interesting, isn't it? Because it really tries to make this dense text more accessible.
Exactly. It balances the original Sanskrit feel with, clear English, and even points out key verses for people who are, let's face it, pretty busy.
Totally. So our mission here in this deep dive is basically to pull out the core ideas, things about finding peace, figuring out action and inaction, understanding the divine, the different spiritual paths. We'll guide you through it.
Yeah, whether you've thought about this stuff for years or you're just starting to feel curious, we're exploring it together. We'll try to unpack these sometimes complex ideas so they connect with just, well, being human. So where should we jump in?
Well, right off the bat, the International Gita Society makes this pretty bold claim. They say humanity's biggest problem isn't lack of tech or resources, but a lack of metaphysical knowledge. That kind of stops you in your tracks, doesn't it?
It really does. And they bring up a core challenge with texts like the Gita, which they call the voice of transcendence,
Right.
language itself. Well, it can only go so far in capturing the absolute. So any translation, helpful as it is always going to be a bit limited, inherently so.
Yeah, that makes sense. But even with those limits, there's this powerful promise in the Gita, right?
Absolutely. It suggests that just reading it, really thinking about it, pondering it, and then trying to live it, that process can free you from what's called sin.
Like water off a lotus leaf, that image.
Exactly that image, leaving you untouched. And the ultimate goal, moksha or nirvana, liberation, basically, from the whole cycle of birth and death.
It's interesting how it starts, too. Very dramatic scene. Arjuna on a battlefield. Huge moral dilemma.
Right. The military context is the setup.
But it pivots so quickly, doesn't it? From that literal fight to these deep philosophical questions, the battlefield becomes a metaphor for, well, our inner struggles.
Precisely. It sets the stage for exploring something much deeper.
Okay. And speaking of deeper, there's this idea that scripture itself, while super important at first, it becomes less essential as you progress towards enlightenment. That's Shankara's view, partly.
That's a key point, yeah. Once you truly grasp the underlying reality, the specific forms, the rituals, the doctrines, they become less central. The scaffolding isn't needed once the building stands firm.
It's like learning anything, really. Like riding a bike. You need training wheels first.
Good analogy.
But eventually you find your balance, and the external support isn't the point anymore.
Exactly. The focus shifts inward. Cultivating a steady, unwavering intellect focused deeply on the Supreme Being. That inner concentration is presented as, well, crucial for enlightenment.
And it's not just about thinking, is it? Not just an intellectual thing. The Gita really stresses that real peace, real happiness.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from constantly chasing sensory pleasures.
Right. It comes from mastering those senses. Through knowledge, through understanding, not just gratifying them endlessly.
So how do we actually do that? Master the senses, because it sounds hard.
It is challenging. The Gita uses a strong image. Uncontrolled senses are like a fierce wind that can just sweep your intellect away, like a boat losing its course on the water.
Okay. So your ability to think clearly gets hijacked.
Pretty much. You drift further from that state of peace.
Which brings us to this really interesting, maybe counterintuitive idea. Ascetics being awake in the night of ordinary life. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, the Gita kind of flips our usual perspective here. What most people consider daytime, chasing worldly success, desires, achievements, that's seen as night for someone seeking deeper truth.
Because they're detached from it.
Exactly. They're free from those fleeting desires. And conversely, what the world might see as night, withdrawing from those pursuits, that's when the ascetic is truly awake to spiritual reality.
So it's about breaking free from those everyday cravings that drive so much of our behavior. And the Gita has that beautiful analogy for finding peace in that state.
The ocean analogy, yes. True peace comes when desires just dissipate within the mind, without causing ripples, like rivers flowing into a full ocean.
The ocean doesn't get agitated, doesn't overflow.
It just absorbs them. remained undisturbed. The point is, someone constantly grasping for more stuff, more experiences, they won't find that deep, abiding peace.
Okay. Now, this naturally leads into karma, action. Arjuna himself was confused, right? Should he study and contemplate, or should he fight, do his duty? Karma yoga.
That's a central tension the Gita addresses. It clarifies that someone who's realized the divine doesn't see themselves as the ultimate doer. They see themselves more as an instrument.
An instrument of the divine.
Yes. And crucially, metaphysical knowledge and selfless service, karma yoga. They aren't opposites. They're complementary paths. Both lead towards the supreme. Often, a balance is suggested as the ideal.
Because, as the Gita says, you can't not act.
Yeah.
Right? Even for a second. We're always being pushed into action by nature.
Exactly. By the inherent forces of nature, we're constantly acting.
But the type of action matters. Or rather, the motivation behind it.
Precisely. The distinction is key. Work done by someone who's self-realized without identifying as the doer or expecting personal gain, that work doesn't create karmic baggage, so to speak.
It's the selfish motive, the attachment to results, that creates the entanglement.
That's the idea. When you cling to the fruits of your work, that's when the bonds form.
And the Gita digs into nature's role here too. These forces, the gunas, they're the drivers.
Yes, the gunas, goodness, passion, ignorance, are described as the fundamental forces of nature driving all actions, using our bodies and minds essentially as their instruments. Understanding this helps detach from the outcomes.
Okay, so if you understand this, how should you interact with people who are still really attached to their work, their rewards?
That's an important point. The Gita advises the wise not to unnecessarily disturb or confuse those who are still operating from that attached perspective.
Why not?
Because even working with attachment initially can actually be a path towards realizing the truth later on. It's part of the journey for many.
So the advice is more like, do your duty, whatever it is, but do it without selfish desire, without getting hung up on the results, without grief, and offer it all up, like a service.
That's a powerful summary, yes. Offer it to something beyond the personal ego.
And even the wise still act according to their nature.
Yes, it's emphasized that everyone acts according to their inherent nature. The key isn't necessarily suppression, but channeling the senses constructively, often through that idea of service to the divine.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Zoom out. The manifestation of the divine, incarnations. Why does the Gita say the divine appears in the world?
It's explained that the Supreme Being manifests or incarnates whenever dharma righteousness, cosmic order, is in significant decline, and adharma, its opposite, is rising.
So to restore balance.
Primarily, yes. To protect the good, guide or transform the unrighteous, and reestablish that essential order, dharma.
Like a cosmic course correction.
You could see it that way. But it's also portrayed very much as an act of compassion, driven by love for devotees. The Supreme, though beyond birth and death, takes form to meet the longing of seekers, to be present for them.
That's quite a comforting thought. The Gita also touches on specific practices like yogic breathing.
Briefly, yes. It mentions slowing the breath as a technique to help reach higher states of consciousness. Specific exercises, mindful awareness, all aimed at quieting the mind, focusing inward.
And within this context, selfless service, it becomes a kind of sacrifice.
Exactly. Selfless service, karma yoga, performed without expecting anything back, is described as a powerful form of sacrifice. It purifies the mind, leads towards self-knowledge, and ultimately brings one closer to the Supreme. It's transformation through action.
And the Gita also suggests that all the different spiritual practices in the Vedas, body, mind, senses, they're all expressions of nature at work.
Yes, understanding that these disciplines are prompted by the forces of nature, and seeing that connection is itself a path towards nirvana, towards liberation.
Reinforces the idea that there isn't just one single rigid way.
Precisely. Many sincere paths, understood correctly, can lead there.
Now, what about gurus, spiritual teachers? The Gita's perspective might be a bit different than some expect.
Interestingly, the emphasis often leans towards seeing God as the ultimate guru, the inner guide within each of us. While human teachers can be invaluable, the text suggests seekers should be discerning, like a bee gathering nectar from many flowers. Collect wisdom, but avoid blind worship of any single person. Over-reliance on an external guru without cultivating that inner connection could potentially be an obstacle.
Interesting. So focus on individual discernment, that direct connection. And as that connection deepens, what does self-knowledge actually reveal?
It brings this profound realization of interconnectedness, that the whole creation, everything, is linked by the same fundamental life force. You start to see the universe within your own higher self and ultimately within the divine. The illusion of being separate starts to dissolve.
So that feeling of being just an isolated individual, that's not the whole story.
That's the core insight, yes. And the Gita offers real encouragement here. It says even someone who's done, let's say, very negative things, they can still cross that river of sin using the raft of self-knowledge.
Wow, that's a powerful image, the transformative power of just understanding.
It is. And that transformation is compared to something incredibly potent.
The fire.
Yes, the fire of self-knowledge is said to burn away the bonds of karma entirely, like a fire consuming wood, leaving only ashes. A complete purification.
Okay. We've talked about action and knowledge. How does the Gita compare these paths directly? Karma yoga versus jnana yoga.
Well, the karma yogi, the path of action, acts without selfish attachment to results. The main goal is purifying the mind. They find peace by letting go of that clinging.
Whereas someone attached to the fruits of work,
They become bound by those desires, those attachments.
and there's that image of the body, the city of nine gates.
Right, that represents the human body with its openings. And dwelling within is the spiritual being, the Purush. The Gita clarifies something important here. The Lord doesn't create the urge to act, or the feeling of I am the doer, or the attachment to results.
So where do those come from?
They arise from the workings of material nature, gunas.
And our ignorance, our lack of understanding, plays a big role.
It's presented as the veil. Ignorance obscures our true self-knowledge, leading to delusion. That delusion makes us identify with our actions, our results, and keeps us tangled in the cycle. But transcendental knowledge that pierces the veil.
It destroys the ignorance and reveals the supreme being.
Exactly.
So once that veil lifts, what does an enlightened person look like? What are the signs, the marks of an enlightened person?
A key mark is profound equanimity. Seeing the same divine essence everywhere in everyone and everything. Learn person, outcast, cow, elephant, dog. It doesn't matter. They see the same eternal being pervading all.
That's a truly radical perspective on equality.
It is. And the Gita says that cultivating this equality is the highest form of worship. Someone established in that state, mind steady, they've already, in a sense, realized the supreme, which is described as perfect and impartial.
And how does that play out in their daily life?
They stay balanced, not overly excited by pleasant things, not crushed by unpleasant ones. Their mind is steady, undiluted. This deep connection brings detachment from fleeting sensory highs and lows, and instead, they experience a profound inner bliss.
Because those sensory pleasures are, by nature, temporary.
Exactly. They have a beginning and an end, so ultimately they're a source of misery if you cling to them. The wise don't seek lasting joy there. Real strength, real yoga, is being able to withstand the pull of desire and anger, even before death.
And those who can do that.
They're the true yogis. They find happiness within, rejoice within, illuminated by self-knowledge. They attain nirvana.
No, we rely a lot on reason, on logic, but the Gita suggests there's something beyond that for understanding the divine.
That's right, the infinite. Well, it can't be fully contained by finite human reason. The Gita points to intuition, a deeper knowing arising from the self as the highest faculty for perceiving the divine.
Like a direct experience.
Yes, often experienced in deep meditation, a state of trance. It's experiential knowledge, beyond just intellectual concepts.
And that brings a different kind of bliss.
A profound, lasting bliss, perceivable only through the intellect when it's attuned in this way, beyond the grasp of the senses. Once self-realization happens, you're never truly separate from the absolute, unshaken, even by great calamity. Yoga itself is defined here as severing that connection with sorrow.
And it requires determined practice.
Firm determination, yes. The Gita also briefly mentions a core meditation practice, witnessing the mind.
Just watching thoughts.
Observing the flow of thoughts without judgment, letting them come and go without getting swept away. Detached observation.
Okay, shifting focus again. The very foundation of reality. What's the Supreme Spirit's role in everything?
The Gita says all creation evolves from the twofold energy of the Supreme Spirit. It's the source of origin and also where everything dissolves back into.
Like the beginning and the end point.
Exactly. It uses that beautiful analogy of jewels on a necklace. Everything is strung on, supported by the Supreme Being.
That underlying unity again.
It's central. The same spirit is in all beings, like the same thread in different necklaces. The divine is the essence. The taste in water, The light in the sun and moon, AUM, the fragrance of earth, heat and fire, life in all beings, austerity and ascetics.
Wow. It's everywhere and everything.
Pervasive. It's the eternal seed, the intelligence of the intelligent, the brilliance of the brilliant, strength without selfish attachment. Even the three gunas, goodness, passion, ignorance, they emanate indirectly from the divine. But the divine isn't dependent on them.
But we get caught up in them.
Yes, delusion by these modes prevents us from seeing the eternal divine beyond them.
Okay, now what about after? After this life. The Gita talks about different paths after death and these huge cosmic cycles.
It describes different paths yogis might take based on their knowledge and practices. There's a path of no return for those with deep self-knowledge and a path of return back into the cycle. It uses an analogy of gross objects existing within subtle space to hint at how the universe abides within consciousness.
And these cycles are massive.
Immense. We're talking 311 trillion solar years for a cycle of creation and dissolution. The divine orchestrates this, like a spider spinning a web and then drawing it back in.
Mind-boggling scale. So, given all that, how important is just remembering the divine in our day-to-day life?
It's strongly encouraged. For everyone, really, whether you're seeking health, wealth, knowledge. Remember the divine. The text says the Lord personally takes charge, takes care of those who remember him single-mindedly, and reciprocates their love.
And even if someone worships other deities?
If it's done with faith, the Gita says they are essentially worshiping the Supreme too, just perhaps in an indirect way.
Because it's ultimately one absolute reality, just with different names and forms.
Precisely. The deities can be seen as representing different aspects, different energies of that one Supreme.
So where does this ultimate reality even come from, its origin?
The Gita states that neither the celestial controllers, the devas, nor the great sages truly know the divine's origin, because the divine is the origin of them all.
Ah, okay. It's beyond their comprehension because they arise from it.
Exactly. But knowing the divine as unborn, beginningless, the Supreme Lord of all, that understanding leads to liberation from karma.
That's a profound paradox. The unknowable origin, yet knowing about it frees you.
It is. The Gita then lists many divine qualities and manifestations: discrimination, forgiveness, AUM, the Himalayas, showing its vastness. It even mentions chanting mantras as a relatively easy path to self-realization for our current age.
And the overall attitude.
To view the world with an ever-joyous heart, seeing the different masks, you could say, of the one cosmic actor.
Now, a really key moment in the Gita is when Arjuna gets this direct vision, the vision of the cosmic form. What happens there?
After hearing all this profound wisdom from Krishna, Arjuna's illusion is pretty much dispelled. He understands the ultimate aim is that direct vision, that experience of God. Faith alone, the Gita suggests, can be a bit shaky without that kind of psychic confirmation. Seeing is believing, for many.
And Krishna grants him this vision.
Yes. Gives him a divine eye to perceive this incredible, overwhelming cosmic form. Countless forms, beings, wonders, all within Krishna's infinite being. Arjuna is just floored, awe, reverence, even fear.
And he apologizes.
Yeah, later he asks forgiveness for treating Krishna just like an equal, a friend, not realizing his true divine nature. He recognizes him as the father of the universe, the greatest guru.
Wow, a powerful scene. Okay, so the Gita outlines 4 paths to God. Why multiple paths?
It recognizes people are different temperaments, different stages of development, so no single method fits everyone.
Makes sense.
It presents 4 main paths: meditation, contemplation for the introspective, ritual, devotional worship for the emotionally connected, dedicating your work selflessly for the action-oriented, and complete surrender to the divine will.
And they all lead to the same place.
Ultimately, yes. All paths, followed sincerely, lead towards devotion, that intense love of God, and salvation, liberation.
So find the one that resonates with you. And what are the qualities of someone who is deeply devoted, who is self-realized?
The ideal devotee. Well, they don't agitate others and aren't easily agitated themselves. Free from excessive joy, envy, fear, anxiety, desireless, pure, impartial, wise, they have let go of being the doer. They're steady, friend or foe, honor or disgrace, pleasure or pain. It's all met with equanimity, content, peaceful, unwavering devotion.
That's quite the ideal. Let's dig into the nature of the Supreme Being a bit more. How is it described?
The Gita is clear. The divine doesn't have an ordinary physical body. It has transcendental senses, infinite potencies. It's inside and outside everything, both animate and inanimate, too subtle to grasp with ordinary senses. And that paradox, again, It's incredibly near right here in our consciousness and infinitely far away in its supreme abode.
Both immanent and transcendent.
Exactly. It uses an analogy. One reality appearing as many, like a single country has many states or cities, but it's still one country. The supreme is the source of all light, beyond all darkness, beyond ignorance, and realizable through self-knowledge.
It always comes back to that inner knowing. Now, faith and devotion as paths to nirvana, how do they fit with knowledge and action?
The Gita says those who really understand spirit and nature, and the gunas, they aren't born again. Regardless of their lifestyle, really. People perceive the supersoul differently. Meditation, knowledge, selfless service.
Right.
But here's a key point. Even those without deep intellectual understanding, they can still transcend death through firm faith and devotion. Sincere faith can be incredibly powerful.
Sometimes the intellect can even get in the way.
It's suggested that excessive intellectualizing can sometimes obstruct that simple, pure faith. So a devoted heart is just as valid a path.
Okay. And what about us, the individual soul? Our role, transmigration.
The Gita explains that the good Lord gives us the faculties, the ability to act and experience, but we are responsible for our choices. Those choices are influenced by nature, the gunas, and our past karma.
And ignorance makes us think we're the ones doing everything.
Yes, that mistaken identity, I am the doer, is what causes the karmic bondage and keeps the cycle of transmigration going. The soul carries the subtle body, the mind, intellect, ego impressions from one life to the next, like the wind carrying scents or dust.
A continuous journey shaped by our actions and desires. And there's that big metaphor for the universe.
That eternal tree, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The universe is an ever-changing tree, but its roots are upwards, in the Supreme Being. Vedic hymns are the leaves. Our desires are the downward roots causing bondage.
Wow. Okay. Now, some very practical guidance. Divine and demonic qualities. This feels really important for navigating life.
It is. The Gita lists divine qualities, fearlessness, purity, charity, self-control, etc., and contrasts them with demonic ones, hypocrisy, arrogance, harshness, ignorance, anger, greed.
But the focus isn't on judging others.
No, definitely not. It's about recognizing these tendencies within ourselves and cultivating the divine ones. The root of all evil, all demonic qualities, is identified as selfish desire, lust, basically. Overcoming that is key to peace.
Lust, anger, and greed. The gates of hell.
That's how the Gita puts it. They need to be avoided for spiritual progress. They block the way.
So it gives us an ethical compass. And how do we know which way to point it? Scripture as a guide.
Absolutely. The Gita emphasizes using scripture to figure out right and wrong action. It implicitly supports core ethical principles, sometimes lifted as the 10 Commandments of Hinduism via Patanjali. Things like nonviolence, truth, honesty, self-restraint, non-possessiveness, purity, contentment, discipline, study, surrender.
Foundational virtues. It even gets into practical things like food, austerity, charity.
Yes, it categorizes them based on the gunas. Food that promotes goodness, sattva, passion, rajas, or ignorance, tamas. 3 types of austerity of body, speech, and mind, and 3 types of charity, depending on the intention and context.
And the best charity.
Given without expecting anything back. Pure intention. Benefits everyone involved.
It's a really holistic teaching, and for those really aiming for liberation, 9 types of renunciation.
These are different ways of letting go that lead towards salvation. Renouncing forbidden actions, negative emotions, pride, selfish motives, the sense of I am the doer, attachment to possessions. The core theme is renouncing selfish attachment, especially to the fruits of work.
And just like food and charity, there are 3 types of knowledge, action, and agent.
Yes. Knowledge seeing oneness, sattvic. Knowledge seeing only difference, rajasic. And irrational clinging knowledge, tamasic. Actions and agents, people acting, are similarly classified by the influence of the gunas.
It provides this whole framework for understanding motivations and perspectives. And ultimately, after all these paths and classifications, the Gita points to surrender.
Yes, the path of surrender as ultimate. Fixing the mind on the divine, being devoted, offering service, bowing down, surrendering, that's presented as the surest way.
And abandoning all duties, what does that mean?
It's interpreted as performing your duties, but without selfish attachment to the results. Offering the action itself is devotion. Not neglecting duty, but transforming the motivation behind it.
And the promise.
The Lord promises to liberate those who take complete refuge in Him, who surrender fully from all sins, all negative karma.
It's a message of ultimate hope and refuge. Now let's touch on some specific verses and Shankara's commentary. That verse about the Supreme Being having no prescribed duty, BG 3.22.
Right. It's fascinating. The Supreme doesn't need to do anything, has nothing to gain, yet engages in work. Why? To protect the distressed, uphold righteousness. It acts, but without any attachment or need, setting the perfect example of karma yoga, even while being above scriptural rules.
In Shankara on reality versus illusion, Maya.
Shankara really drills down on this. He says the unreal things that change, like heat, cold, pleasure, pain, has no true permanent being. The real, the eternal self never ceases to exist. Maya, ignorance, makes the self appear to be the perceiver, the experiencer, because of its connection to the changing mind.
And actions prescribed in Scripture.
He sees those primarily for the unenlightened as steps on the path. The enlightened person sees inaction in action. They realize the self is actionless even while the body-mind acts.
Shankara also explains why fighting for Arjuna became a duty, despite nonviolence being a general rule. Commentary on 2.3233.
Yes, for a kshatriya, a warrior, a righteous battle that presents itself becomes a specific dharma, an unavoidable duty in that context. Refusing it means forsaking duty, losing honor, incurring sin. Dying in such a battle, he notes, could lead straight to heaven.
He also traces that downward spiral from desire. Commentary on 2.6263.
Meticulously. Thinking of objects, attachment, desire, frustration, anger, delusion, loss of memory of higher truths, loss of understanding, spiritual destruction, a clear causal chain.
In Arjuna's question, if wisdom is better, why fight? Commentary on 3.1.
Shankara addresses this seeming contradiction. If liberation comes from a combination of wisdom and appropriate action, then trying to separate them and say only do one doesn't make sense from the perspective of the goal, which requires both in harmony.
What about sacrifice nourishing the divine? Commentary on 3.1112.
It's presented as a cosmic cycle. We nourish the divas, divine forces, through sacrifice, and they nourish us, for example, with rain resources. This mutual support leads to the highest good. Enjoying creation's gifts without offering back is seen as, well, theft.
And the duty of the enlightened. Commentary on 3.2526.
They act without attachment, yes, but also with a purpose. To guide others, to prevent people from going astray, for the welfare of the world. But gently not disturbing the beliefs of the ignorant, who are still attached to work's results.
The knower of truth understands the gunas acting. Commentary on 3.2829.
Right. They see the gunas act on the gunas. It's nature interacting with nature. The self is separate. Because they know this, they don't get attached. The deluded do get attached, and the wise shouldn't unsettle them prematurely.
And true renunciation, Sankhya versus Yoga. Commentary on 5.5 and 6.2.
Shankara sees the state reached by Sankhyas, knowledge path, and Yogis, action path, as ultimately the same. True insight is seeing their oneness in result. He clarifies that karma yoga, action done rightly, is a form of renunciation, because true yoga requires giving up expectations, desires for results. You can't be a yogi without renouncing that attachment.
The vision of oneness is key for the yogi. Commentary on 6.29.
Absolutely. The yogi with a concentrated mind sees the same self everywhere, in everything, and everything in the self. This vision of sameness leads to absolute bliss through contact with Brahman.
But Arjuna points out how hard this is. The mind is restless. Commentary on 6.3334.
Yes, Shankara acknowledges Arjuna's valid point. The mind is turbulent, restless, hard to control like trying to control the wind. Maintaining that yoga of sameness is difficult.
And the delusion of duality affects us from birth. Commentary on 7.27.
Shankara explains this arises from our likes and dislikes, inherent from birth. This duality obscures the knowledge, the true non-dual self.
Remembering the divine at death is crucial. Commentary on 8.56 and 8.7.
Extremely important. Whatever state of being one remembers at the end determines the next existence. So Shankara stresses constant remembrance throughout life, dedicating thoughts and actions to the divine.
And meditation is the way to reach the Supreme Person. Commentary on 8.8-9.
By meditating with a mind engaged in practice, yoga, not straying, focused solely on the divine, one reaches that supreme, effulgent person.
What about the unmanifested, the immutable? Commentary on 8.2221.
Shankara describes this as beyond even the unmanifested potential of the material world. It's the supreme Brahman, the ultimate goal. Reaching it means no return.
And those two paths after death. Commentary on 8.2426.
The bright path, path of the gods, associated with light, knowledge, leads to no return. The dark path, associated with smoke, night, ignorance, leads back to the cycle after enjoying temporary results of actions.
Worshipping other deities. Commentary on 9.2223.
Shankara reiterates, those who do so with faith are unknowingly perhaps worshiping the Supreme just indirectly, because the Supreme is the ultimate enjoyer and Lord of all sacrifices.
And worship is made accessible. Commentary on 9.26.
Very much so. Even a simple offering leaf, flower, fruit, water given with devotion from a pure heart is readily accepted by the divine. It's about the devotion, not the material value.
And liberation is open to all. Commentary on 9.3233.
Shankara highlights this emphasis. Even those born in circumstances considered less advantageous spiritually, he mentions women, Vaisyas, Sudras, in the context of the time, can reach the highest goal by taking refuge in the divine. How much more so for holy brahmanas and devout royal sages?
The divine actively helps devotees. Commentary on 10.10.11.
Yes. To those ever devoted, worshipping with love, the divine grants buddhi yoga, the wisdom, the understanding by which they can come to him. Out of compassion, he destroys the darkness of ignorance with the lamp of knowledge.
The divine's pervasiveness is stressed again. Commentary on 13.116.
Shankara emphasizes the object of knowledge, Brahman, is everywhere. Hands, feet, eyes, heads everywhere. Within and without. Moving, non-moving. Too subtle to grasp. Far, yet near. Undivided, yet appearing divided in beings. Source of light beyond darkness.
Nature, Prakriti, and the soul, Purusha. Commentary on 13.21.
Shankara clarifies, nature is the cause of the body and senses, the instruments. The soul, Purusha, is the experiencer of pleasure and pain because of its association with nature and the gunas born of nature.
And the self as witness. Commentary on 13.23 and 13.30.
The supreme person in the body is the witness, the permitter, supporter, experiencer, the great Lord. Realizing that all actions are done by nature alone, and the self is the non-agent that is true seeing.
What causes birth in good or evil wombs? Commentary on 13.22 and 14.16.
Shankara points to the soul's contact, its identification, attachment with the gunas, qualities of nature, as the cause. Good work, sattva, leads to pure results, rajas leads to sorrow, tamas leads to ignorance and lower births.
The eternal tree metaphor again. Commentary on 15.1-3.
Shankara elaborates. Rooted above in Brahman, branches below, cosmos, nourished by the gunas, nature, sense objects are the twigs, Vedic hymns the leaves. Understanding this tree and its impermanent nature is knowing the essence of the Vedas. Cutting its deep roots, attachment with the strong acts of non-attachment is key.
And the supreme abode, liberation. Commentary on 15.6 and 8.55.
That abode isn't lit by sun, moon, or fire. Going there, one doesn't return. It's the supreme abode. Attaining the supreme comes through devotion, leading to true knowledge of the divine.
The importance of renouncing attachment to results. Commentary on 18.2 and 18.6.
Shankara defines true renunciation, Tyaya, as abandoning the desire for results in all actions. Even obligatory duties, like sacrifice, charity, austerity, must be performed, but relinquishing attachment and the fruit that is the best. Firm conclusion.
And the ultimate path, surrender. Commentary on 18.6466.
He emphasizes this is the most secret, supreme word. Fix your mind on me, be devoted, sacrifice, bow down. You will come to me. Abandoning all other dharmas, duties, supports means taking refuge only in the Supreme. He will liberate you from all sins. Don't grieve.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into these incredible sources, we've really journeyed through the vital importance of self-knowledge, haven't we? Understanding action, inaction, the nature of the divine.
Absolutely, and exploring the power of both selfless service and deep devotion, and how surrender emerges as, well, perhaps the most direct path to liberation.
This exploration, it gives a solid foundation, right? A way into some very rich, complex ideas that express, right, we mentioned, maybe a shortcut to just being better informed about this wisdom.
Exactly, a starting point for your own continued exploration.
And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to just sort of mull over. How might truly taking on board this idea of being a divine instrument, acting not just from ego, but as a channel for something larger, how might that actually change the way you see your daily actions and their consequences?
It's a powerful question to sit with. We really encourage you to keep exploring the Gita and its commentaries further.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.